I've known Joe Biden for many years, so 40 years and more. We often had our agreements, but we've had our disagreements. We've been able to overcome them. I hope we can overcome them now, but we will do what we have to do to protect our country.
Let's bring in Bloomberg's Paul Wallace in Dubai. Morning, Paul. You've had this ramping up of threats on weapons from Biden to Israel, but from that interview, it doesn't seem like Netanyahu has been shifted at all by these threats.
Alizé, that's correct. He is very much saying that Israel will go ahead with its plan to attack Rafah and take out the remnants of Hamas that are there, and Israel thinks that up to 8,000 Hamas fighters are in the southern Gazan city. I think it's important to note that it's not just Netanyahu that's saying this, it's pretty much politicians across the Israeli spectrum, even the likes of Benny Gantz, who he's in the war cabinet, but he is essentially in opposition, the leader of an opposition party, and even members of leftist parties as well. They're not pushing back much, if at all, against this idea that Israel has to go into Rafah. The country seems intent on it, despite what Biden has decided to do by delaying this shipment of about 3,500 bombs.
OK, so the international pressure perhaps not making much of a dent, but domestically you've also seen a significant expansion of Israel's budget deficit, $16 billion, the war bill so far. At what point does that become unsustainable and the domestic pressure actually change the situation on Rafah?
I think that's a very important element towards this. Bloomberg, we've been covering the financial cost of this war, not just on Gaza and the West Bank, but also on Israel since it started. And it is growing and it is becoming very significant. You mentioned the budget deficit there. Well, Israel announced yesterday that the 12-month trailing fiscal deficit through April was 7% of GDP. That's extremely high by Israeli standards. And that's larger than what the government was projecting for this year as a whole. And it may say that things can smooth out over the coming months of the year, and that the deficit for 2024 won't go much above 7%. But that's going to be a tough ask. This war in Gaza continues, obviously. Israel is using huge amounts of armaments there, very costly ones. The skirmishes, the everyday skirmishes with Hezbollah on the northern border are continuing. And Netanyahu himself has said that Israel will have to ramp up spending, not just this year, but for the next few years to come at least. So I think this is something that's going to, well, it is already having a big impact on the Israeli economy. But I think it's increasingly clear that this is at least a medium-term thing, if not a long-term thing. In terms of sustainability, for now, it's okay. Their debt levels are fine. They've still got a very high credit rating. They're rated single A and even A+ by one of the main agencies, despite a downgrade a couple of months ago. So on that side, they're okay. But certainly, this war is more costly than Israel was envisaging, in the few days after October the 7th, or even in November and December.